Alright, yo, Adi, how we doing at LA Regionals today?
Yo, we are 1 hour late for round one, but I should have bet with nails last night, so I'm going 9-0.
9-0, baby.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi and today we have our first team report from the Los Angeles Regional Championships, and this time it is my own team report. It has been a while, I think since Orlando last year, where I've really been proud enough of a performance of mine to publish a team report, and this time I got all the way to top 4 with Calyrex Shadow. I got my medal for the first time. This is my 5th regional top cut and my first time getting to top 4 and getting that medal. So I'm really proud of my performance, and I'm really proud of the team and the work I put into this team. I think it's really strong, and I'm going to dive right into how I built it, how I used it, all the EV spreads, everything you need to know about how to use Calyrex Shadow in one video. So let's jump into it. All right, so why did I choose to use Calyrex Shadow? Well, if you follow me on Twitter, you might have seen this clip that I posted from Tub Takes 2 weeks ago after Indianapolis Regionals, where, as you probably noticed, the Calyrex Shadow was nowhere to be seen. It had entirely flopped, and it would even flop more or less at the Stockholm Regional Championships the next week. It was just not common. And after Indianapolis, I expressed this opinion on Tub Takes that I thought Calyrex Shadow balance was still really strong. I thought that people were maybe overreacting to it being good. It was everyone's top restricted on their tier lists going into the regional. And of course, Wolf had just won the a big grassroots tournament using Calyrex Shadow Clefairy as well. So I think everyone was really game planning for it going into Indianapolis, and that it's really easy to counter one restricted when you only have one restricted. And so when people really build their teams to hard beat Calyrex Shadow, and the Calyrex Shadow teams are not necessarily hard built to beat the metagame, it becomes a lot harder to be successful. That was, you can listen to the entire 5-minute clip on your own time. I'm not going to play that here, but essentially that was the crux of my argument, was that the metagame was really respecting CSR, or Calyrex Shadow Rider, and I thought that the Calyrex Shadow players, the most notable one being Joe Garte, who's maybe the best Calyrex Shadow player at this tournament, despite not having the best finish. I thought his team was really not, did not expect what the meta was going to look like. It was not very strong into the metagame, despite using very strong Pokemon. And I can, yeah, here it is. All right, so yeah, here's what he used. You can see he had Nasty Plot Psyshock, right? Very powerful combination, very good into something like Calm Mind Terapagos. But when Specs Terapagos is the team that gets second at the tournament, gets top 8 at the tournament, gets second at Stockholm Regionals, I think all of a sudden this sort of team gets a lot worse. It's a lot less powerful. And so I decided I was going to, especially after essentially getting ridiculed for this take, getting laughed at for this take, I said, you know what? I have 2 weeks before Los Angeles Regionals. This weekend, the weekend of Indy, I also earned my Worlds invite using the Terapagos team that Nick had used to get top 8 at this regional. And I said, okay, well, I have a backup plan in that case. I can, at the very least, use Terapagos if I need to. But I want to give myself a shot at winning this regional. Getting top 32 doesn't help me. I gotta win. I want a top cut. And so I took a bet on myself that I could build a better Calyrex Shadow team than anyone had built so far, and that I could do very well with it into what this metagame looked like. And I did. And so here is the team that I used at Los Angeles Regionals. Obviously, it is very similar to the team that Mont used to win Los Angeles Regionals. It's very similar to the team that David Niss used to win the Mexico City special event the same weekend. And obviously, and there are also some pretty significant differences that may be a little more nuanced. I watched a couple people break down these regionals and special events, and I feel like my team is getting looked over a little bit, but there are some pretty significant differences that I wanted to cover. But I want to go through the team building process because I think it is quite interesting. Because again, I called it a spite-fueled team building process, but I really did feel like I had a chip on my shoulder, not because of my friends, but because of me, because I had underperformed this entire season, and because I really wanted to do well, and also because I thought this Pokemon really was being disrespected, and I could build it really well. So I started out with Calyrex Shadow and Clefairy. Those were the only 2 Pokemon that I knew I was going to run at Los Angeles. The reason for Clefairy, one was, yes, Wolf did do well with it. Wolf did use Clefairy Calyrex Shadow, but I had known that, and that definitely played into my decision, but the other 4 Pokemon were entirely unrelated. I came to them from my own process, and the only reason I chose Clefairy immediately was because I have a history of doing well whenever I use Clefairy. I won 2 really big grassroots tournaments in 2020 using different Clefairy teams, and I also made day 2 at San Antonio Regionals last year this season, which was my only really good performance this entire year, and I only got top 32. So I decided that, you know what, Clefairy has been really good to me so far, and there is clearly a way to build Calyrex Shadow Clefairy that is going to be very strong. Let me try using this guy. I think that I can do pretty well with it. So I started with those 2, and I just decided I was going to throw anything and everything in my builder and play a couple games with it if I thought it might have potential. And the first thing, and then if Mont did have potential, I'd say, okay, this is a piece that enables Calyrex Shadow. I'm going to put it on the team, and let's figure out, now that we have a 3-mon core or a 4-mon core, let's figure out how to round it out, right? So incrementally building my team up into something that, you know, could have been really cool. I had some really cool Pokemon in my builder, but it turns out the mons that were performing the best in testing really were just the good Pokemon. And so Mon 3 is actually the Mon that is different from Wolf's team, from Mont's team, is the Raging Bolt. I immediately, or not immediately, but the Pokemon that made me think that this combination could work was the Max Speed Raging Bolt. I realized that the strongest thing that I could be doing for my Calyrex Shadow was giving it speed control and doing chip damage at the same time, putting it in range of Astral Barrage, giving it slightly better ranges, and threatening Pokemon with priority. And so the toolkit of Electroweb and Thunderclap that Raging Bolt had was really, really strong. I thought that Electroweb and then Volt Switch, or Electroweb then Draco Meteor then Volt Switch, would be the strongest thing I could be doing with Raging Bolt, because it would put Calyrex Shadow in a position where maybe my opponent has a Pokemon at 60% health or 70% health and a Pokemon at 20% health after taking a Draco Meteor and a Volt Switch, and then Calyrex Shadow can click Astral Barrage once with Clefairy next to it and win the game. As you can see, I did end up dropping Volt Switch from the set. That was a pretty last minute change, because that relatively idealistic scenario of clicking turn 1 Electroweb, turn 2 Draco, turn 3 Volt Switch, or even just turn 2 Volt Switch didn't actually come up that often. And what was more important was being able to threaten a Knockout or Tornadus no matter what. And that way I could just remove their speed control, so they only ever get to click Tailwind once. So that was, even though the original premise didn't really come into play, the Electroweb synergy was really, really strong, and the Thunderclap synergy was really, really strong. And essentially that spot is the speed control slot, right? That is the Tornadus slot as well. You can pick the strengths and weaknesses, but I definitely think that, for example, the Radiant Tornadus really gave the Koraidon matchup a lot more play to it when Mont was using it. But I did beat both the Koraidon that I played, or all 3 Koraidon that I played, so it wasn't necessarily all that bad. But yeah, there's a few different reasons to use each of them. Mirror is another big one that I think the Mirror gets a lot better with Tailwind, but I did not really respect the Mirror. As you can see by my speed stat on Calyrex Shadow, I did not respect the Mirror, and I thought that Raging Bolt was the strongest Pokemon into basically every other matchup. So I had Clefairy, Calyrex, and Raging Bolt. And from there, once I really decided that I was going to use Combined Calyrex, Incineroar was the natural 4th Pokemon, because I wanted physical damage mitigation. I'm using a special attacker that boosted special defense. I wanted ways to stop physical attackers from running over me, and Will-O-Wisp and Intimidate were the 2 best ways of doing that. So Incineroar got slotted on the team, and once I had that 4-mon core, it was kind of pretty easy to round it out with Fire, Water, Grass. It wasn't necessarily the intention, but I don't remember exactly how I got to Rillaboom, Urshifu from there. But it turns out that Rillaboom, Urshifu are pretty good. The Rillaboom, of course, Miraidon had just won the big tournament at Indy. Rajan had won the tournament, and so I really needed to respect that, and Rillaboom is the easiest way to respect that. I figured that passive healing with Rillaboom would be really nice for a bulkier Calyrex Shadow that would be very, very difficult to KO. And on top of that, I really, really respected Miraidon. I really did not want to lose to the team that was, at Los Angeles at least, the most common team in the room was Miraidon. So having a good matchup into that was really important. I did not start with Choice Band. I actually started with Miracle Seed. The Choice Band suggestion came at the very last day by Rajan, and we can talk more about that in a second. And then Urshifu, I genuinely do not remember why I put the Urshifu on the team. What I do remember is that Nails had used Taunt Urshifu on his version of Terapagos, and I found that Taunt Urshifu and Wisp Incineroar were really, really strong into Calyrex Ice Rider, and so I wanted to use that set, and more so than Choice Scarf. I thought Choice Scarf was not all that strong, although it was pretty good in the Calyrex Shadow Mirror, or at least it would have been. But yeah, I thought that the taunt Urshifu was the way to go. And I also did not necessarily start with Focus Sash. I actually had bulky Mystic Water for a while with Terra Water, and I could talk about why I made the changes that I did there as well. But yeah, fighting coverage is generally really, really strong with Calyrex, and I knew I needed a fighting type somewhere on the team, and it turned out it was Urshifu, just because it is the best fighting type. It could have been Mienshao, right? Like, I didn't actually ever test Mienshao, believe it or not. But Urshifu is really good. Urshifu creates pins, so I liked Urshifu a lot. Again, just through testing, just through trying out a lot of different stuff, I just came to the conclusion that, yeah, the good mons are, in fact, the good mons. And so, to dive into exactly why I used these sets, I can start with the Covert Cloak Calyrex Shadow. So, I started with I actually started with Leftovers Calyrex Shadow because I had a Rillaboom on the team, and I decided that I really wanted healing, right? Healing is good, and I wanted to be able to live forever, essentially, but I realized really quickly that the best way to deal with Calyrex Shadow next to a Clefairy is with spread moves. And if you get Electrowebbed, if you get Snarled, stuff like that, which AV Raging Bolt, I think, was the second most common or Raging Bolt in general was the second most common Pokemon at Los Angeles, at least in day 2. You really don't want to lose to Electrowebs and Snarls and Bleakwind speed drops and stuff like that. And certainly when you Terra Fairy, you don't want to be able to get faked out, right? So it was really nice to be able to ignore all of that with Covert Cloak. The Davidness used Clear Amulet to block Parting Shot on his Calyrex Shadow, which is something similar. But I figured that I have a Clefairy. I'm not very scared of Parting Shot. I'm more scared of spread moves. And so that is why the Covert Cloak item came into play. Shoutouts to Raghav. I think that they were the first person to really come up with that as far as I saw it. I know it was floating around on ladder quite a bit, but I saw Raghav use it and thought this might work, and when I tested it, it was excellent. So I stuck with it. As for why I used Calm Mind over Nasty Plot, that I did actually test both of them. I decided very quickly that I needed to not lose to Terapagos. It had just gotten second at Stockholm Regionals. It had just gotten second at Indianapolis Regionals. I thought it was going to be a menace. I think it is one of the strongest restricted Pokemon out there, and Calyrex Shadow is really weak to it, naturally, right? It can't hit the normal type with Ghost-type Astro Barrage, and it can't Terra defensively like it wants to, get a base power boost on its Draining Kiss. And so, as a result, I thought that Calm Mind was maybe the best way to deal with it, where at least now I can tank hits from the Specs Terapagos, get a Calm Mind up, get 2 Calm Minds up. Now we're at parity, right? They can't KO me, I can't KO them, but that's fine. I can trade with all their other Pokemon and then deal with the Terapagos later in the game. So that was my thought, was that Miraidon and Terapagos were the 2 best performing restricteds going into Los Angeles Regionals, and Calm Mind is really, really good into both of those. You Calm Mind before Miraidon moves, you Calm Mind before Terapagos moves, you get that special defense boost, and now all of a sudden, they can't knock you out, especially when you have Friend Guard up. So yeah, that was my thought process behind Calm Mind. I was very aware of the fact that it did make me weaker to Calyrex Ice Rider. You might notice that I lost to Ryan Haig in Swiss on stream, and then Mont beat Ryan Haig in the finals of that regional, and I think Mont had a significantly better matchup into Ryan, largely because Nasty Plot gets you into the ranges much faster. But essentially what I said was, I think that I don't necessarily need to get to +2 to win that matchup. I thought that when I tested the matchup, it was pretty even. Well, at least I tested against the team that Justin had used to top cut Indianapolis Regionals, which is pretty similar to the team that Ryan used, with some slight differences here and there. But I thought the matchup was even, and Ryan is a really, really good player, and he managed to beat me. And I also lost to the other Calyrex Ice I played, so maybe the matchup is a little worse. Maybe that does need a little help. It is the most common restricted now, so maybe I do need to tech a little harder for that. But I have a lot of damage calcs in the back of my head, and I think I have a lot of tech choices that do okay into it. But yes, Nasty Plot is going to be a lot better into that matchup. So those are the trade-offs, right? You have to, when you go into a tournament, accept your trade-offs. And for what it's worth, I did go 2-0 against Terapagos at this event, and I beat Joji, who had just gotten second at Stockholm. I beat him in round 8. So I felt pretty good about that choice when I had to play 2 Terapagos in day 1 of the tournament. And then, of course, it fell off a lot in day 2. So maybe it was the right play to disrespect it, but I did play 2 of them and I did beat both of them. So I am pretty overall happy with choosing to use Calm Mind. And on top of that, man, smashing Miraidon, I played 3 Miraidon that tournament and beating every single one of them. And I think not dropping, did I drop a game against Miraidon? I don't even know. Like, I remember one of my opponents, I double 4-0'd the Miraidon player, because that's how good Combine Calyrex Shadow can be in that matchup. And so, yeah, I really wanted to win those two matchups. If I was fishing for matchups, it was for those two. And that's why the Combine Calyrex Shadow was on the team. I think that the rest, like, Terra Fairy Draining Kiss is something that I don't know if it was exactly expected, but I thought I was pretty confident it was the best version of Calyrex Shadow. The other thought is that Calyrex Shadow gets a lot better when you don't have to play the mirror. And as a result, I could cut a lot of speed investment from it because I'm not going to play the mirror, right? That's all there is to it. And if I do play the mirror, I had some lines into the timid specs versions, and I hoped that the slower versions would be modest and would also be slower than me, because I had a little bit of speed creep. So now that we're jumping into EV spreads, I can pull it up on Showdown. This is my Calyrex Shadow set. Essentially, I hit 190 speed. This is the one EV spread that is super in depth. That is really important, and the rest of them are kind of whatever. But I had very precise calcs in mind for Calyrex Shadow because I brought it to literally every single game of the tournament. And so the speed stat was pretty straightforward in that 187 is modest Miraidon, which is the standard. I wanted to Combine before modest Miraidon got to move. I also randomly outsped an adamant Chenpao. I don't think Chenpao should ever be adamant. I won that game because of that. But yeah, so at the very minimum, you had to hit 188 speed with Calyrex Shadow. And because I disrespected the mirror, I did not really feel the need to do too much faster. But also, I decided that, okay, if I face a Calyrex Shadow, let's say 10% usage, right? Half the time, they're going to be max speed timid because they're choice specs or whatever. So that's 5% usage that I'm never going to outspeed, that I just have to have game plans for, assuming that I got undersped by them. If I wanted to run max speed timid, I would lose so many points from all of these other stats. And especially with Combine, you need every point of special attack that you can get to do damage. So I really wanted to leverage the fact that I could steal all these points away from speed and put them in other stats, put them in bulk, put them in damage, right? And so with 188 speed being the minimum, I decided to run 190. That is 2 points of speed creep, essentially hoping that if I faced a Calyrex Shadow, it would either be max speed timid and I could deal with that, or it would be 188 speed or 189 speed and I could deal with that. And you saw that Mont was somewhere in that range because I outsped them in Top Cut. And I still lost. That matchup is really hard, but again, I didn't expect to see other Calyrex Shadow. I wasn't game planning for other Calyrex Shadow a lot, especially not other Calyrex Shadow Clefairy, when that was not really common in the metagame at the time. And so I said, I'm going to not face the mirror, but if I do, hopefully the margins I need can be by a little bit of speed creep. So I hit 190. That was my number. I also realized that because I have Electroweb, I wanted to outspeed some Fluttermates after an Electroweb if they have Speed Booster. And that was another number where, again, those guys, 187 is max speed modest, and they usually are not modest if they are Speed Booster. And if they want to invest all the way in bulk, they have to be 188 or 189, right, to be Speed Booster. Or usually they could actually be slower, but usually they are in this range. And so I wanted to speed creep that, and if I can outspeed Fluttermate after an Electroweb, that matchup becomes a lot easier. So this speed number really came into play. I spent a lot of stuff. Notably, like Koraidon is another one where Adamant Koraidon hits 187, just like Miraidon. So there's a bunch of stuff at that 187 number, and I think the right number of speed creep. My one fear about using Calyrex Shadow moving forward, the reason I'm doing this team report is because good luck figuring out what speed stat to run. I got to cheat and run very little speed, but now that it is back in the metagame and being faster is so important, you are going to lose some leverage because you are going to lose some bulk and lose some special attack, and I do not want to tell you where to take that out of because that is easier said than done. With respect to the rest of the spreads, so the 180 HP, 84 defense had some very specific calcs in mind. Let me pull this up. Yeah, so the main calcs were that I wanted to live a Urshifu Surging Strikes in Rain from Scarf Urshifu, because that is one of the more common ways of dealing with Calyrex Shadow Rider. Notably, same type attack Terra, the boost from that actually offsets Friend Guard exactly. So because I live this attack, if they Terra Water and I have Clefairy on the field, I will also live that attack, right? It's the same damage roll, I believe. It's very similar at the very least. And so that was a calc that I really wanted. I also wanted to make sure that if I got, I could just set up in front of Zamazenta, and I could set up in front of Ice Rider. And so I wanted to, at the very least, live 2 Glacial Lances. I thought that was very, very important for me, for Clefairy and Calyrex to live 2 Glacial Lances, and that is basically what this spread does. On the special side, it lives the Specs Astro Barrage into +1 Spadef Specs Astro Barrage when I have Shadow Rider on the field, or when I have Clefairy on the field next to Shadow Rider, and I Terra Fairy it. This was sort of a cheesy line into the Specs CSR teams that were very common on ladder. Again, I did not think that I had much to do into timid Shadow Rider other than try to catch it off guard with some calcs. They were usually Terra Ghosts, so they could not really defensively Terra, and I could defensively Terra. And so that was kind of my idea into that, is I could get a +1 Spadef pretty easily, or I could either get a +1 Spadef, or I could just go Terra Fairy, Helping Hand, Astro Barrage, and either way, they were in a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. So this is the 1 EV spread that was very, very precise, that I really wanted these numbers. Notably, 198 maximizes the healing that you can get from Grassy Terrain. This is divisible by 16, and therefore you cannot, this is as many points of healing as you can get from Rillaboom's Grassy Terrain as physically possible on every turn. More investment does not increase your healing. So that is why 180 HP, 84 defense. The special attack number is just all of the rest of the special attack, right? That's basically all there is to it. I don't think there were any especially relevant calcs that can't come to mind for the special attack stat, but yeah, that is and then the 4 special defense is the 4 leftover EVs. So yeah, those were the calcs that I had in mind for Calyrex Shadow. There are very, very few points to take away. In fact, I think I was originally 188 HP and 148 speed to get a slightly better roll on the Urshifu. I don't exactly remember, but or there was some roll that was slightly better, but decided that actually, you know what, we can do a point of speed creep. 12% is just fine. So that's kind of where I ended up on the Calyrex Shadow. The Clefairy is just max HP, max defense, 4 Spadef. There are calcs for this as well, but essentially it just impacts your Ice Rider roll, and that is, I think, really important to be able to deal with that. Ice Rider is just the most common Pokemon in the format, so giving yourself the best odds to live that, and then also giving yourself the best odds to live 2 Heavy Slam from Zamazenta is important. They don't always run Heavy Slam. Sometimes they run Behemoth Bash, which you do always live 2 of, but sorry, at -1. And the idea with this team against Zamazenta, which again at the time was the 2nd or 3rd most common restricted, it had just won Stockholm and just won Santiago regionals or special event. The idea with that was just, hey, if I can stick Calyrex and Clefairy in front of a Zamazenta that's lowered its attack stat, right? It can boost its defense. It's clicking Body Press into a Ghost type and a Fairy type. That's just fine by me. And I can get an Intimidate off on it pretty easily. I don't even have to Terra Ghost. Everyone expects you to click Terra Ghost Will-O-Wisp into it. I don't care. I can just switch into Clefairy, and the Clefairy can tank any 2 hits from this Zamazenta, assuming even if they read the switch and Heavy Slam me, which they did very often in game 2 and 3, it would still be okay because I could still get multiple turns of setup in front of that Zamazenta. The Zamazenta was sort of neutralized as a Pokemon because of Intimidate and because of my Ghost typing. So that was the idea behind the Clefairy EV spread. There are arguments to run some special defense investment. There are some calcs that you miss because you don't run special defense investment, but I really wanted this into Ice Rider and Zamazenta because those were the 2 restricteds that were really common that I expected to bring this guy into. The Raging Bolt EV spread is just max speed, special attack, jump number, and then the rest in HP. So to give you an idea of what that means, I use jump numbers a lot, so I'll explain that real quick. A jump point is if you have a boosting nature, every point gives you 1 additional point in that nature. Every 8 EVs, gives you 1 additional point in that nature until you hit the quote-unquote jump point where you get 2 points boost. So you can see from 184 to 185 is 8 EVs, and 185 to 187 is 2 EVs. Is 8 EVs, is 2 points for 8 EVs. So that's just a little more value, and the rest was just in HP. And then the forced defense for special defense, because you get 2 points for the price of 1. Why not, right? And so the speed was max speed, and this was for a couple of reasons. The first is because, again, every Miraidon, every Koraidon are going Adamant or Modest. I guess Koraidon doesn't really matter nearly as much, but I really wanted to be able to outspeed stuff like that after an Electroweb. And so, and I did. I outspeed Adamant Chenpao. I outspeed Modest Koraidon after an Electroweb, and it actually did come up in day 2 where I played Carter, and he was very surprised that my Raging Bolt caught the Miraidon with an Electroweb on the switch, and then Draco Meteored it and KO'd it, and essentially won the game for me. And so that was really nice. It also turns out that Raging Bolt are running more and more speed investment, and being the faster Raging Bolt is really good. And then lastly, and this will tie into my Incineroar EV spread. The Raging Bolt outspeeds Modest Pelipper, but not Timid Pelipper. Timid Pelipper hits 128 speed. Modest hits, I think, 117 speed or something like that. And so that ties in with my Incineroar EV spread, where I have the special defense investment required to live a Timid Weather Ball from Pelipper, but I could not EV to live a Modest Weather Ball from Pelipper. And so if I would either be able to outspeed Pelipper with Raging Bolt and T-Bolt it, or I would be able to live an attack with it from Incineroar, one or the other. And so hopefully I could sort of create pins that way. Although I will say the one time that it came up, I did end up going down. They got the 18% roll on my Incineroar to pick up pick it up. So it didn't really even come up. But that was another reason for running Timid Raging Bolt. And that was actually exactly the reason for my Incineroar EV spread, because Incineroar EV spreads are somewhat arbitrary. I guess, yeah, I talk about this again. It was just this. I wanted the defense investment. I don't remember what for really. Really, it's just that Incineroar comes into matchups where you want to be able to tank a hit from a physical attacker. So it's nice to have a little bit of Fizz Def, but maybe I should have prioritized putting more Spid Def. Again, you can see this is the jump point right here, which is why I picked that. And then it also turns out it had a nice roll into Pelipper, and I didn't really want to commit the investment required to make that a better roll. The speed stat is sort of just speed creep again. Being faster than the opposing Incineroar is really nice, but also it was because I wanted to get some cool Electroweb speed tiers. And so I think that it was like, yeah, okay, I remember what it was. It was that the Raging Bolt is 127, and so if I get an Electroweb off with the Raging Bolt, I will outspeed everything that the Raging Bolt outspeeds with Incineroar. So even if my opponent is 127 speed Raging Bolt, if I Electroweb it, my Incineroar will be faster than it. And so that was another thing that I thought might be pretty valuable when I am using this Incineroar, right? So those were the speed tiers involved here. Being the faster Incineroar is really nice if they have Taunt, and you can see that like Mont had Taunt. I don't know whose was faster. I don't know if it ever came up, but getting taunted, especially by Ice Rider Incineroars, before you can Parting Shot, before you can Will-O-Wisp, is actually very annoying. So I wanted to have a little bit of speed investment at the very least, although realistically, if I really wanted to commit to being faster, I mean, there were some Incineroars that were really, really fast in this tournament. So I'd argue that it was more for the Raging Bolt speed tier, and you could probably cut the speed even further because it only comes up like theoretically, right? Like there is a world where you hit an Electroweb into a 127 speed Pokemon and then Parting Shot it, but it's not very common. Yeah, so that is the Incineroar again. Then the other two EV spreads are, well, I guess the Urshifu spread is pretty common. It's pretty straightforward. The big thing that I did choose to do is go Jolly instead of Adamant on my Sash Urshifu. And this came up. This was actually really, really nice. I outsped some stuff I did not expect to. Part of this is because if you are a YouTube channel member on my channel, you can see that I have some speed tiers that are made from Showdown stats. And these are every single Pokemon and every single speed stat. And it is, yeah, here it is. Okay, so this is every single Pokemon, every single speed stat in April usage stats. I'm going to post, this is a little outdated. Obviously, I will be posting May usage stats for channel members exclusively. So look forward to that. And I thought this was really useful because I could do things like look at Zamazenta, right? And I could say, okay, here are the speed stats that all the Zamazenta hits that were used on the Pokemon Showdown ladder, right? So I can see here, there's a lot of them that hit 157. That is one of the most common numbers. And if not, they're hitting 180, which I will never outspeed. There's very few of them that care about numbers like 169 for Timid Chiyu, although I think that's becoming a little more common. You can see here, and again, Urshifu, Jolly Urshifu, not really a speed tier. So I got to potentially outspeed a lot of the Zamazenta that I would see in the tournament with my Urshifu, and that could potentially change the way a matchup is played, right? So that was one of the reasons that I ran Jolly. I actually outsped Joji Kaida's Chiyu, which was Sash, and that made that matchup a lot easier. That is part of how I beat Terapagos, was just outspeeding the Chiyu, I guess. But yeah, it was nice to beat Jolly, theoretically outspeeding all the other Urshifu as well. Fast Taunt is always nice. Stuff like that, it was pretty convenient. And so I figured the other thought was that even if I don't take KOs, my Urshifu doesn't actually have to take knockouts a lot of the time. My Sash can allow me to put things down into Calyrex shadow range. And sometimes with this team, putting things down to 10% is better than knocking them out. And so I didn't really feel like I needed the extra damage, or at the very least, I said that if I were missing out on KOs, I would find ways to take advantage of that with my restricted Pokemon. Like I mentioned, Taunt was mostly for the Ice Rider matchup. It didn't really come up when I actually got to play Ice Rider in this tournament, but it came up a lot in practice. One of the stronger pins into the Ice Rider team was taunting the Amoonguss and then having the Shadow Rider and Urshifu on the field next to each other, where I could Surging Strikes, Astral Barrage some of the Calyrex Ice Riders, and they couldn't always Terra out of it, and they couldn't redirect it, and they didn't really have a safe switch in to it. And so that was one of the ways that I tried to deal with Ice Rider, although in my stream game against Ryan, he played really well. He never let me position that. And same with my my loss to John in Swiss as well. He had a different variant with Rillaboom, and so it never really got to come into play. But yeah, so that was the reason for Taunt. And then finally, Stellar is because I wanted a Terra into Terapagos. I think that Terapagos is really strong, partially because it can deny your Terras. It says you don't really get to Terrastallize profitably in this game, and especially with a Shadow Rider player, as a Shadow Rider player, I wanted to have a profitable Terrastalization into Terapagos because that was already a bad matchup. And so using Stellar Close Combat would always KO Terapagos even from full HP, provided that it was in Terrestrial form, right? And if it was not in Terrestrial form, then I wasn't scared of it because it couldn't actually hit my Calyrex Shadow a lot of the time. And also, if you put Calyrex Shadow next to Terapagos, you could do things like Draining Kiss for chip and then Close Combat it, and you can knock it out, which you can't do with Scarf Urshifu. And so I put a lot of pressure on Terapagos by leveraging my Urshifu really well. Again, the other reason for Urshifu is that Ice Rider. I wanted it for Ice Rider, and especially for Terra Fire Ice Rider, because they can Terra out of Will-O-Wisp, and otherwise Safety Goggles Will-O-Wisp on Incineroar is one of the best ways to deal with Ice Rider. Of course, all these Ice Rider players have counterplay, so you have to find counterplay to the counterplay, etc., etc. But my thought was, if they're using Ice Rider and they're going to try to Terra Fire out of my Incineroar, then I can put them in a really awkward position with Taunt, Surging Strikes, Urshifu, right? So that was essentially the reason for the Urshifu. It was really strong. It was maybe one of my best Pokemon all day, although I could say all these Pokemon were my best Pokemon all day. So, yeah. The Incineroar, I don't know what else to say. It's an Incineroar, you know? It's a pretty standard Incineroar. I don't think I ever Terra'd it, but Terra Ghost could theoretically come up. You could also theoretically be something different, and I would feel fine about it. I'm trying to think if the other Terra types came up. Like, obviously, Fairy on Calyrex Shadow came up. Electric on Raging Bolt was a last-minute addition. It was the... I put the Electric on Raging Bolt when I dropped Volt Switch, and I ran T-Bolt just to get myself... I felt like it was the best Terra. It was a defensive Terra. I really needed to Terra it when I brought it into Ice Rider and brought it into Chi-Yu Fluttermane, so they couldn't just double me with Moonblast and attack and knock me out. And so I decided that, yeah, okay, Terra Electric is also a defensive Terra, and it gives me some cool ranges with Thunderclap and whatnot, and it really did. It really put in work. So, yeah, that, and then Clefairy I did Terra as well. I didn't really Terra it into Amoonguss because they all were next to Ice Rider, but I did Terra it to take attacks from Urshifu a lot better. So like an Urshifu Tinglu board state turns out is a lot easier when you can Terra Grass your Clefairy and kind of wall those guys. So that was useful for that. And then Stellar Terra, like I mentioned, came up a lot. And then finally, the Rillaboom is the last Pokemon on the team. And this was a Miracle Seed until the day before the tournament, where I was playing some practice games with Rajan. And essentially he said that, listen, like, you need more burst damage with your team. Like, you don't really exert enough pressure on lead with your team, and therefore it is really easy for me to kind of do whatever I want if I can't overpower your yeah, so you can do whatever they want, right? You're only using pressure. You can't take KOs turn one. And you need to be able to do that, or else they can just kind of overpower you. You can just throw out damage, and you have to take a turn to set up no matter what. That's fine into some slower teams, but into faster teams, you can't always give them, or they don't always give you the turn to set up, and you need to find ways to create those turns to set up using pins and using offensive firepower. And so the Miracle Seed Rillaboom turned into Choice Band Rillaboom, and Fake Out turned into High Horsepower. And this change single-handedly salvaged my run, like, legitimately. It's funny because I don't think I would have beaten Rajan in top 8 if he hadn't suggested that I use Choice Band Rillaboom on the team. But yeah, I really did need the burst damage to beat matchups like Koraidon, and it put in work all day. Grassy Glide pressure is so good. I two-shot Rajan's Chi-Yu, for example, with Grassy Glide, which Miracle Seed does not pick up on, and that put a lot more pressure on him. Of course, you have to be the offensive Terra. I don't have a Chien-Pao on my team, so I really do need the multipliers occasionally. And you can see here, this EV spread, Roshan hated it. I'll say that. He said, this is so stupid. Why are you not just max attack on your Rillaboom? Now, I did not, I'm not sure, maybe, again, I changed this Pokemon very last minute. So I didn't really have time to test out what exactly the EV spread I needed was, play games, figure out the situations. No, I just kind of did something that, this is how I do EV spreads in general when I don't have specific calcs in mind, I guess. So like I mentioned earlier, we got jump points, right? So this is a jump point for these attack stat, and this is the last jump point for attack stat. So every other point I give in attack from now on would only give 1 point, and this is the last time that I will get 2 points for 8 additional EVs in attack. So that was a natural point for the attack. This is again, just like I think the Calyrex Shadow is the same HP stat. This is the maximum amount of HP that Rillaboom can recover from grassy terrain recovery, which is very important because it sets up grassy terrain for itself. So I felt like I would be very stupid to not give it maximum recovery from grassy terrain. And then the speed stat was especially to outspeed Tornadus in case I faced a non-covert cloak Tornadus for some reason. I would feel really stupid if I electrowebbed it and then it still got to Bleakwind before my Rillaboom got to move, right? So I said, you know what? We'll just hit 121. There's some other stuff. I think Mienshao is another thing that you can outspeed at -1 speed if you get an Electrowebs off on it. There's some other stuff. But yeah, outspeeding Tornadus on the off chance they weren't Covert Cloak was the reason for this. Again, you can get Grassy Glide before they Tailwind, potentially, if you get that off, or before they Wood Hammer before they Bleakwind, or U-Turn before they Bleakwind, or whatever. So that was the real reasoning for the speed stat. But that being said, if you chose to do something like this, I would totally understand, right? Like I think this turned some 50% rolls into 75% rolls that I was not really familiar with because I hadn't used this Pokemon before. So, you choose your own discretion, choose your speed stat, but that's kind of how I do it, is I will attack bump, HP number, speed stat, and then 4/4 is just kind of the quick and gritty EV spread that I got, and I hit all the numbers that I wanted, so I felt really good about this EV spread overall. So before I jump into my game plans and how to play the team, I want to talk about my preparation process for this tournament because I think that it can help a lot of players. I had 2 weeks before the regional to build this team out, and like I said, initially I just was trying everything out. And then after that, after about a week where I was winning more often than ladder than I was losing, and I noticed there was a lot of me right on ladder, and my team was doing very well into that specifically. And I was like, part of why I was winning so much was because I was queuing into a lot of me right on ladder, and I was beating every single one of them. And so I felt really good about the team. And then the weekend before Los Angeles, I was actually in Toronto for a bachelor party from one of my friends. And so I did not have a ton of time the weekend before Los Angeles to really prepare. So I was kind of just went in on faith. I got to see Stockholm results, and I got to feel a little more confident after seeing Stockholm results, knowing that I could also do pretty well into Zamazenta. Maybe a little scared because the Terapagos team was a little spooky, but I didn't have a ton of time to actually ladder and playtest the week before the tournament. And so instead I stuck to gauntleting, which is to say that I had a bunch of teams that I thought were going to be really common, and I thought really hard about my matchups into them. Or some of the ones that I played against, I had idea of how I wanted to play against them, and I felt pretty good against them. But I also had a list of teams that I wanted to prepare against that I hadn't prepared against yet, or that I thought were hard matchups that I wanted to be very precise into. And so that list was essentially, I wanted to beat all the Ice Rider players I played because that is the most common matchup. I wanted to play against Terapagos because that is the scariest matchup. And then I wanted to play against the two Zamazenta teams that were common, both the Michael team, Michael Zhang, Michael Gerbesti team, as well as the more traditional version that Eric Rios and Alex Gomez were using at Stockholm Regionals. And so I wanted to play against all those matchups, and I started to, and I played against Roxon. Shouts to Roxon for helping me with Ice Rider prep, and he is the person who initially suggested running T-Bolt, Terra Electric, Raging Bolt, and after playing against Nick with with Joji's team, right? So Torn, Chiyu, Flutter, Terapagos. That also really cemented the idea that I had to be T-Bolt, Thunderbolt, because even though in testing against kind of random teams, the Draco Meteor the Webb's Draco Meteor Volt Switch line was coming up into practice against teams that I expected to play in the tournament, it wasn't coming up, and I needed that firepower. And so that was really, really good. That's where, ladder isn't always the best. You're not always going to see a representative metagame. You might overreact to the teams that are more common on ladder. And so knowing that I had a matchup, knowing that this was the right choice given what I really expected. The day 2 metagame, the top players to use was really important. And literally, I did face Joji in the tournament, so it really came up to know how to beat his team specifically, at the very least. So yeah, so the Raging Bolt was because of that. And then I faced Condor, who was using a Koraidon team. He used the Koraidon team to get top 16 at the Puerto Rico special event and earned his Worlds invite with Koraidon team. And I did not really respect Koraidon going into the tournament. I didn't really think about it very much, but Nick was sitting in Los Angeles with me practicing with his team, and I was sitting there, and Connor had told me we were planning on going to the LA Sparks game against the Indiana Fever, and my girl Caitlin Clark. And he was not feeling a little under the weather and already had his Worlds invite. So he said, you know what, I'm not gonna come to LA, cancel this trip. So I was like, hey, what are you using? You want to play a set? And he played me his Koraidon team, which had some cool text on it. I'm not gonna reveal those in case he used them at nationals, but that team was really, really hard. I got stomped, and I realized that my Koraidon matchup was really bad, at least trying to do the traditional way of playing the team with Raging Bolt and Clefairy and kind of slowing my opponent down, putting my Calyrex Shadow in position. No, they have Clear Amulet. I never get faster than them after a Flame Charge, and they kind of overpower my team as a result. And so that was actually really, really useful because it forced me to think about the Koraidon matchup before the tournament, think about how I wanted to play it. And it's also really important because of what I'm going to talk about when I talk about how to play the team, because it forced me to realize that I can't just play this as a balanced team like I wanted to play it. I had to also figure out lines that were way, way more aggressive, because I was going to get outpaced by teams like Koraidon if I weren't more aggressive, right? And so that was my thought after losing to Connor, like in really, really emphatic fashion. And so I was kind of just dwelling on that, thinking about it in the back of my mind. And then I played Nick again on Specs Terapagos, and once again he realized that no, you can't really play passively into this team. You have to lead Chiyu Flutter. You have to play really, really aggressively into this team, because as soon as I get a Calm Mind off, a lot of your damage output is gone. But if you can Icy Wind, if you can Shadow Ball me or threaten to Shadow Ball, you can Heat Wave me, then all of a sudden maybe you can overpower my Calyrex Clefairy, get Terapagos in a position where it does really well, Snarl might threaten to Terra, stuff like that. So you have a lot of lines into that if you lead really aggressively. And again, I needed more tools into these really aggressive leads. And so that was the other matchup. And then Rajan also helped me out by playing some Zamazenta games with the Eric Rios Zamazenta team. And again, on ladder, these were not very difficult, but in practice, they were a little more challenging because I did not have the burst damage. Also, shout outs to Donald and to Michael Zhang, who helped me think about the way that I would approach matchup into their version of the Zamazenta team. Even though Michael was using a pretty similar version of the Zamazenta team, I didn't play him, thankfully. But yeah, I had to think about that matchup a little bit, even though I didn't get to play test against it. But essentially, Rajan was a person who said, you need more burst damage on this team. Miracle Seed is a little silly. Like, you should run Choice Band, just commit to it. And I thought about it and I said, yeah, that makes sense. He also suggested Jolly Urshifu. That was something that I was kind of indifferent about, but I thought about it. I was like, yeah, I kind of justified it to myself. And then he also, that interaction, along with the interaction with Roxanne, really cemented the fact that I should be Terra Electric, Thunderbolt, Raging Bolt. I'm still not really sure if Thunderbolt was better than Volt Switch, but yeah, that was the one. Also, I guess I should mention that Michael Clefairy, I didn't really talk about this. I kind of just glossed over it because I am so used to using Clefairy. But the Clefairy is 17 speed IV, so it underspeeds Calyrex Ice in Trick Room, so I have that certainty. And then Sing is really good because 2 reasons. One is that I want my opponent to target my Calyrex. I want them to put damage into it so I can recover it with Draining Kiss. And I need them, in that case, if I'm clicking Calm Mind and letting them attack my Calyrex, I need to do something like Clefairy. Clicking Protect isn't very good. Clicking Follow Me when I want them to attack the Calyrex isn't very good. Clicking Helping Hand on Calm Mind is not very good. So what move can I click? Davidness had a really cool idea on his Mexico City winning team, which was Icy Wind. I wish I had considered that. I think Icy Wind would have been really cool on that team, but I did not consider it. Instead, I used Sing, which and Mont used Teal Pulse, which I think, pros and cons. I think that they're both really good into Ice Rider, which is the main one. Sing, the idea is that if they ever click Trick Room into me, then I will have 2 chances at hitting a Sing. And 55% accurate, I only have to hit one of them to win the game. So I will take that sort of odds into Ice Rider. And obviously, if I hit 2 of them, then I'm in a fantastic spot. And there were some matchups where I hit multiple sings, and there were some matchups where I missed multiple sings. That's just how it goes. But the other thing is, again, on those turns where I just want to click Combine, I don't care what my Clefairy does. I just need Friend Guard on the field. I just fire off a sing. They have to respect it. And some people respected it maybe a little too much. Other people just kind of got caught out. And a lot of people just dodged them, honestly. I hit under half my sings in this tournament. So that's the reasoning for sing. I said this on when Alex was streaming on Monday that Calyrex, that Clefairy's sing is not a move that can miss. It's a move that can hit. You never click it. Hopefully you are not clicking it in situations where you need to. But that being said, it also can bail you out of bad matchups, get you back in the game. Against Combined Terapagos and a Combined Lugia that I played, it also came up a lot because they take turns to set up and you take turns to set up, and you are just clicking sing while they set up, and then you set up faster if you hit one of them, and usually again they give you 1 or 2 chances to hit it. But worst case, they put if they just put a Terapagos on the Combine Terapagos in the field, what are you going to do to it with your guys? Nothing. You want to ignore it, but you also don't have great ways to. You want to be able to set up your Calyrex to take the attacks from it. You want to be able to hit the partner slot really hard. You need the Clefairy still, right? You want to redirect Dark Pulses if they have Dark Pulse, and so just click and Sing is a pretty safe play on those turns. So yeah, Sing is actually very good, but there are other options that I think you can run. I don't think that it is mandatory, whereas Helping Hand and Follow Me, to me, did obviously feel pretty mandatory on the set. So yeah, I forgot to talk about that earlier, but that's the Clefairy spiel, I guess. And yeah, that was all the practice I got, really. I got the 4 practice sets more or less. In my preparation, I did a lot of talking to people. I would just DM people and say, hey, what do you think about this matchup? How would you approach it? Like, talk to me about it. I had a group chat with Sohaib and Kieran and Joe UX9. Kieran and Joe had played a lot of, Kieran Singh had played a lot of Calyrex Shadow games, and so even though Joe opted not to use this team, we worked on it a little bit together. I was definitely bouncing a lot of ideas off of him, and he basically said at the end of a couple days before the regional, he said, I think that Zamazenta Balance is better than Calyrex Shadow Balance, and ended up using me right on instead. Which, fair enough, but Kieran and Joe were both huge helps as well, just talking to them. Also, huge shout outs to Chase and Sohaib for listening to all of my dumb ideas that were spewing out and keeping me sane for the entire 2 weeks as I tried all these different iterations of this team and came to, again, the most boring conclusion possible. But yeah, that is kind of the team building process itself. Shout outs to everyone who helped me out. It was really, really helpful. Just everyone who talked to me, everyone who bounced ideas off of me, everyone who gave me suggestions. I mean, I've listed off a bunch of people, but yeah, it was really, really important that it really does take a village. And even though I made fun of my friends for laughing at me for saying Calyrex Shadow is bad, or they said that Calyrex Shadow is bad and laughed at me for saying that balance would be good. I really could not have done it without them. So big shout outs to all my friends who helped out throughout this building process, throughout the tournament. But yeah, let's talk about how to play the team, because this is, again, I talked about this earlier when I faced Koraidon. This is a balanced team. I built this with Series 10 balanced C Calyrex Shadow teams in mind, where I really wanted to kind of slow the game down, get turns to click Combine, but always exert pressure and slowly chip things into range of Astral Barrage and get boosts to put things in range of Astral Barrage, and then kind of throw out damage when I needed to, and really pick my spots to be very aggressive, right? And so that was the idea behind the team. But what I realized when I was playing the team is that can be very weak to teams that can just out aggro you. And as a result, what I learned is that you have to identify when you are the aggro player and when you are the control player. This is something that I actually learned from playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, from playing trading card games, where that is a pretty common dynamic, where even if you're both playing aggro decks or even both playing control decks, you have to figure out what your role is, how your deck matches up into your opponent, and when you want to go fast, when you want to go slow. Basically what I was told is that in card games, there's always an aggro player and always a control player, and you just have to figure out which one you are based on your deck. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. That was how I played this team as well. When I played against Pokemon like Koraidon, I realized after that one set that I have to be the aggro player, and I have to do things like throw my Rillabooms, my Choice Band Rillaboom into a Chiyu, just fire off attacks into it, because you got to get the damage off. You got to put things in ranges. You can't give them turns. You have to get your you have to exert that initial pressure to really get anywhere. On the other hand, against some other teams, maybe you are the control player. Maybe you are just playing the instant Urshifu Rillaboom control. Maybe you're playing instant Raging Bolt Calyrex control, right? You're just trying to slow the game down, chip things down, put your Calyrex in the perfect position, and then you can win the game from there. And so there are some, you have to be able to be very cognizant of the pacing of the game. I guess is what I'll say, right? You can't ever get caught out of position. It is a balanced team in that respect. A lot of times, if you take a KO you're not supposed to and your opponent gets a free switch, you can get put in a really awkward spot. Calyrex is the one who wants to take the KOs. You want to be able to Draining Kiss and get your health back. A lot of times you don't necessarily, sometimes you don't want to hit things because you want to be able to get more recovery. Other times you want to be able to put things down low to 10%, 20% so that you can Astral Barrage them even without a boost and knock them out. Maybe Astral Barrage and Incineroar at 20% and knock it out, right? Then you get your special attack boost. Every single turn that you don't have to click Calm Mind and you take a KO instead is a turn that you're getting a special attack boost and doing damage, which is really, really strong. So Calm Mind was really good in some matchups, but other matchups, I had to be the aggro player and just try to get my boosts by KOing my opponent because getting the Calm Minds off wasn't actually going to be very helpful. It was going to be a little too slow for me. And then my opponent tried to play like an aggro player into my aggro team. Then, sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, right? But at the very least, that was my best game plan. And a lot of times I ended up winning, especially against Koraidon. That was the really, really big one where the Rain Dance Torn versions that Mont used has a very different game plan into it. They can do a lot. They can manipulate the weather a lot more. I can't. So I have to knock things out fast. And that's what I did. So that's kind of the idea. I didn't really have specific leads into specific matchups. And honestly, a lot of the times in game 2, I would lose game 1 because I led poorly and then figure it out on the fly because I had so many tools. The Calyrex Shadow was not always led, but it was led pretty, like Calyrex Shadow Clefairy is not an unreasonable lead. It is a pretty common lead, but I really liked things like Raging Bolt Clefairy lead. Again, I built my team with Raging Bolt Clefairy as a lead in mind, so I could Electrowebs and click Electroweb Sing, and they can't actually take a KO, and I get a lot of chances to get turns, and then position my Calyrex Shadow, because I get a Sleep off, and I get a Speed Control off, and I get a Volt Switch off, or a Draco off, and then next thing you know, my Calyrex Shadow's in the field in the perfect position to take 2 knockouts. And that was kind of the way that I wanted to approach that. So a lot of times I would lead Clefairy Raging Bolt. Another very common lead, because it was very easy for my opponent to double protect if I didn't lead my Calyrex, was I would lead things like Incineroar or Urshifu, right? Just exert a lot of pressure immediately right off the bat. What are they going to do about it? They can't protect on my fake out. And that was just another, that's a common lead, but Incineroar, Urshifu, Calyrex, and then Flexbot was a pretty common mode for me to go with as well, because they can't protect. I am going to put something into range of Astral Barrage next turn, and that's a pretty common way of playing more aggressively, right? So, and also I think Incineroar Urshifu is pretty good into like Ice Rider, just because you can taunt the Amoonguss, you can threaten a Will-O-Wisp on the Ice Rider, you force a Terra. If they're Terra Fire, then you can Surging Strikes it. So that was another thing that I like to do into Ice Rider. The Rillaboom was probably my least brought mon. Rillaboom and Raging Bolt were the least brought mons in the tournaments, but Rillaboom was obviously really good into Miraidon, and Raging Bolt was really good into things like Chiyu teams, I guess is what I'd say. Into Miraidon, on ladder, what I would do is I would just lead Raging Bolt, or lead Rillaboom, excuse me, because they would always lead Miraidon, and then they would click Volt Switch, and I would click U-turn, and I would get my terrain pressure back on. And I would also be able to get a Calm Mind off before they Volt Switch, and I was usually in a pretty commanding position. But most of them Miraidon at this tournament were running Chiyu. And so you can see among them Miraidon I played, you can see that Carter had Chiyu and James Evans had Chiyu. And then the one that didn't was where'd it go? Yeah, the one that didn't was Jeremiah, who was running the same team that Roshan used at Indianapolis Regionals, and I did double 4-0 him. He did not take a single knockout in our entire set, which is what happens when you don't have a way to actually pressure Rillaboom on Miraidon teams, right? So the Chiyu variants were really, really scary. And as a result, I think I didn't actually lead Rillaboom into them, but a lot of times they did not lead Chiyu into me either. Or sorry, they didn't lead Miraidon into me. They always led Chiyu into me. They didn't always lead Miraidon into me. And so that was one of the ways that I adapted over the course of the tournament, learning my matchups as I went. I had not faced Chiyu Miraidon going into the tournament, but as you can see, I did beat both of the ones that I did face. Rillaboom was mostly for Miraidon, but it came in a lot of other matchups. It came against Koraidon, against both Colin and against Rajan in top 8. I had to play my Rillaboom. I had to put things in range of Grassy Glide really aggressively. Things like Fluttermane would be put in range of Grassy Glide with just Terra Grass, Grassy Glide in general, stuff like that. Even Koraidon, I had a calc that I believe was like, I think it was like Helping Hand Astral into Terra Grass, Grassy Glide picks up Koraidon, which meant that if I just YOLO'd into and said, I dare you, click Flare Blitz, click Terra Fire Flare Blitz into my Calyrex, you can take the knockout, that's just fine. I am going to put you, I'm not going to have to need it. I'm going to rely on my Raging Bolt and Rillaboom and stuff like that to win the game for me instead. So that was I didn't actually end up doing that line, but I definitely committed to. I was willing to click Helping Hand Astral Barrage turn 1, and in fact I beat Colin, I believe, in game 2 turn 1 because I just clicked Helping Hand Astral and I took a knockout into his Koraidon because he didn't KO my Calyrex. And so you get to do stupid things like that if you have the Choice Band Rillaboom in the back against, even though you're facing a team that has Raging Bolt, Grass type, double Fire type, or Koraidon being a Fire type, right? It is kind of stupid that Rillaboom, Choice Band Rillaboom specifically, is still really good into that. It really changed the way that I had to think about that Pokemon altogether and which matchups. You're not doing super effective damage with it. You're doing neutral damage with it, or not very effective damage with it, and you're picking up KOs anyways. Who cares? So yeah, that's an important aspect of playing the team. I talked about my Tropicos matchup. You really want to keep the Urshifu alive until the very end of the game and 1v1, or alternatively, if it's Combine variant, if it's stuck on the field, or if you feel like you can create pins very effectively, you can put the Calyrex Shadow next to the Urshifu. You can Draining Kiss close combat it, and you can always pick up no matter what, unless they switch out or they switch in Intimidate or whatever, right? So not always switch pick up, but it's a pretty reasonable way of approaching that matchup. And then the final matchup that I wanted to hit on was the Zamazenta matchup. I talked about it earlier that the goal is essentially, I did the same thing basically every time, even though the Zamazenta players I faced had kind of weirder variants. I faced the two Screamtail Zamazenta in Jose Mena and Zach Thornburg. So not the versions that I expected to face, but the principle was still the same, which is that I always do the same thing. Always lead Incineroar Calyrex, always switch to Clefairy with Incineroar, or click Fake Out. Sometimes you click Fake Out into Zamazenta and then you switch out. I didn't want to lose the Incineroar. I didn't want to tear the Incineroar. I wanted to get my free turns to click Combine, get my 1 boost off. That was really all I needed. It's hard to switch to Clefairy. Clefairy in this case also kind of nullified Screamtail in a lot of ways. Jose stole a game from me because he crit my Clefairy on the turn that he got the Screamtail in, and it made it so he could get an Encore off or something like that. But other than that, like I was pretty confident. Like Clefairy is really good into Screamtail, so it turns out that matchup was pretty good. And again, if they can't body press you, then Zamazenta is a lot less of a Pokemon, and this is the restricted that they can't really body press. So sometimes, even just like literally game 1, I would lead Incineroar, switch to Clefairy, switch back to Incineroar, switch back to Clefairy, and just say, call it, I dare you. You can't kill the, like, first off, you're targeting my, like, I talked to Michael, they were like, yeah, we're just going to target down like the slot that isn't the Calyrex, right? We're going to try to 1v1 you. And I said, okay, yeah, you got to call your slot. You got to call it right. You got to call the body press into my Incineroar switch in, which I do less often because I can also protect the Clefairy. And Clefairy also lives the attacks. Or you have to create a pin somehow is really what it is. And these teams did not really have an effective way, I think, of creating pins. I think the Michael Zhang version of it, I think, was probably stronger, probably had better ways of putting pins into Pokemon like Clefairy, but the Screamtail versions did not really exert nearly as much pressure into Clefairy, which made it a lot easier for me to steal. Not to steal. I think I had a pretty good matchup. In fact, I had a very good matchup into both Jose and to Zach Thornburg, and I managed to win both those sets. So that is basically all of the, I guess, big matchups that you'd expect to see in a tournament. Obviously, you will face other random stuff. You can see here, I faced a Groudon in round 1 with the Clefairy. I faced a Lugia in round 7 at 6-0, which is actually a scary matchup because it was Combine Lugia and has Aeroblast. So the way to play that was, how do I minimize the number of chances he has to get a critical hit onto me through my Spadaf boost, right? It was a very, and honestly, he got the crit game 2, and he had chances to get a game 3. It was kind of spooky. Notably, I did not talk about my Calyrex Shadow matchup. I did not think about my Calyrex Shadow matchup. I thought about the Specs matchup. I did not think about the Nasty Plot matchup until before top 4. And I think with more time, I could have had a better game plan into it. I didn't bring Rillaboom in either game. You can listen to Mont and I talk about it a little bit on Tub Takes, but it was. I think that it was probably him favored, but it was one of those things where it was him favored because he got to take advantage of turns better. And so if I had decided that I want to be the aggro player and just turn 1 say, I'm just going to click Helping Hand Astral Barrage, I'm not going to commit my Terra, you can KO my Calyrex, that's just fine. I'm going to then kind of turbo through, you're going to go priority, and I'm going to go and turbo through your team with Raging Bolt Rillaboom. I think that might have worked. In fact, I think that's what I should have done, but I didn't. I think that was the line that I was going back and forth between that line game 2, and I decided, actually, you know what I can do? I can switch into Astral Barrage and click Fake Out. That's super cool. I forgot that I can't click Fake Out into my Calyrex. But I forgot that I couldn't click Fake Out into his Calyrex because I can't click Fake Out into my Calyrex. And so game 2, I was like, I'm going to try to do that, and it didn't work. I was a single away from potentially winning that game, but when you say that you're a single away from winning a game, usually that means you're on the back foot. Although that being said, a 55% chance to win games that you're on the back foot on is not the worst thing in the world, right? So, yeah. So if you are using this team moving forward, you will have to think a lot harder about the Calyrex Shadow matchup. Good luck. The last thing that I'll say is that again, on top takes, I put a lot of thought. I talked about this. I put a lot of thought into the Ditto matchup because Ditto was really good, and it was 7-0 going into the fake day 2 of this regional. And so I was running calcs for if I'm at +2 SPDF and they're at +3 special attack, because I just took a KO and they copied my Calyrex Shadow, and they Terra Ghosted because they can't copy my Terra, but I Terra Fairy. Now I have Friend Guard up. How much damage are they doing? What ranges can I take KOs at? Right? I had to know exactly what ranges to take knockouts at if I face Ditto. And thankfully, as you can see, I did not face a single Ditto. So I didn't have to really think about that too much, but that was something else that I had to know using this team. And so with that, I think let's talk about the tournament itself. I'm not going to talk about every round, but I'll try to talk about some of the highlights of the tournament. But I will say, again, Sing is a really funny move. At San Antonio, I hit 73% of them. And in round 1, my opponent was on Gravity Clefairy, as you can see, with Precipice Blades and Bleak Wind Storm and Leer Tornadus. Not nearly good enough, by the way. He would Leer me, spread move, gets around Clefairy, Precipice Blades me, and still miss KOs, which I really appreciated. Yeah, he couldn't click Gravity because I had Sing pressure, right? So that was pretty cool. But I missed my first Sing into him, and then I hit my second Sing into the Groudon switch in, and I won game 1 like that. And then at that point on, after missing my first one, I hit 7 straight Sings. So I don't remember exactly which matchups I hit Sings against in this, but in the first 4 rounds, I hit 7 Sings in a row, including into the Combine Terapagos that I faced. I did say I did double for row the Miraidon player I faced. And then into the Combine Terapagos I played, I thought that I was a Donner. I thought that I was going to lose because I thought this was my worst matchup. And it turns out that I actually kind of 3-0'd him. Game 1, I said, like, okay, let's figure it out. You know what you got to do. You got to trade. You got to Sing. You got to trade, and then you got to take the KO with your Urshifu. Right? That was the game plan. And game 1, I do all that. I hit a Sing. Again, Combine Terapagos gives you turns to hit Sing. I hit a Sing. I think he gets a 1-turn Wake, and then he also crits my Calyrex Shadow with Grassy Glide from -1 Rillaboom when I really was banking on living that attack. And that kind of lost me the game immediately. And so I was like, all right, I was very tilted because it was a hard matchup. I was playing super well, and I just needed to not get lucky that game, and I got unlucky in game 1. So game 2 rolls around, and naturally, I hit both my Sings. I hit my Sing into Terapagos, and then I hit a Sing into the next switch in, and I am crushing it. Right, and so I win that game pretty cleanly, largely because I hit my first 2 Sings. If I hit one of them, it would have been a game. If I hit neither of them, it would have been not a game. I probably would have lost, right? But, again, like I said, if my matchup is I have to hit one of my 2 Sings, I'm usually in an okay spot, and I can hit 2 of them, and I can just crush. So that was my matchup into that. And then game 3, my opponent was so scared of Sing that they brought their Taunt Urshifu, and I taught them why they don't bring Urshifu into me, at least non-Scarf Urshifu, because it is what I call a health pack. It is where I get to click Helping Hand Draining Kiss, and I Oko it, and they don't get the taunt off. And then they have 1 fewer Pokemon, and I still have my Clefairy on the field. And so that was how I beat this guy with Combine Terapagos. And I think that my opponent, they were so unbelievably tilted after losing to that. They were so disappointed. And Sing is a pretty tilting move, right? It does inflict psychic damage despite not having an attacking move, right? So that was pretty cool. My opponent definitely brought the wrong Mons game 3, and kind of got caught out by the Sing Clef, which is pretty cool. And then so that was the first 4 rounds. I hit 7 of my 8 Sings, including 7 straight in that, and my friends were like, what are you doing? What kind of black magic do you have with Clefairy? So naturally, I think I went like 3 for 12 for the rest of them or something stupid like that. I ended up, after day 2, I was under 50% on Sings. After hitting 7 of my first 8, I think I hit 3 or 4 for the rest of the day, or the rest of the 2 days. So it evens out, right? It does even out. And I won a lot of games despite missing things. And so, yeah. The next round, I played James Evans, who was using the Miraidon team. And this is my first exposure to the Miraidon Chiyu team. I kind of had to figure it out on the fly. And thankfully, game 1, he played really, really well. I dodged 2 heat waves on turn 1 and turn 2. That was really, really nice. It gave me a lot more room to breathe. And then it put me in a really commanding position. And then he played out of his mind to pull it back when I thought that I was maybe I played a little too conservatively. I think I definitely did play a little too conservatively, but he got every single call right, it felt like, to pull the game back, and then put himself in a winning position, and I dodged and overheat on my Calyrex Shadow to win the game. So a little disappointing for sure, but that is the nature of using a team with Heat Wave, Overheat, Hydro Pump, right? Like, yeah, you're gonna miss some Draco Meteor, right? Like, yeah, so he had a really, really bad stroke, he had some really bad luck, I should say, in our set. And then game 2, he leads Miraidon Chiyu like he did game 1, and this time I lead my Raging Bolt, and I lead Raging Bolt Clefairy, and I say I'm going to Helping Hand, Terra Electric, Thunderclap the Chiyu, and with all those multipliers, with Electric Terrain up, and with Helping Hand, and with Terra Electric, I do pick up the Chiyu, and a lot of them are Terra Ground on this style of team. He was not. Notably, because I picked up that KO, that also meant that the Terra Electric Volt Switch from Miraidon did not pick up my Clefairy. And as a result, that game was very, very straightforward. I won that game pretty comfortably. I did get a T-Bolt crit on his Farigiraf on the switch-in, but let's be real. I think after I took the knockout on the Chiyu, after my Clefairy lived in attack, I was in a pretty good position to win that game regardless. So I got very lucky, all things considered. But notably, I did miss both my things against James. So, did I get really lucky? I didn't know. I did. But that was the start of my Clefairy kind of missing a lot of attacks. Yeah, I played Jose, and again, like I said, the Scream Kill Zam stuff was pretty straightforward. I played Ian. He said it was his first regional, and he was 6-0 with Calm Mind Lugia. Super cool team. I think he said that James Beck was going to feature it on the channel, so look out for that. But yeah, it was a scary team to play against. But the Calm Mind Lugia versus Calm Mind Calyrex Shadow matchup was essentially like, can he crit the Aeroblast? It does have a high crit rate. It also has a chance to miss, and he only has 8 shots at it. So game 1, I think he brings the wrong Mons. He does not really figure out how. I think he brought Cornerstone or something, and he didn't really play it right. And I kind of just stomp him game 1. Game 2, he gets the critical hit immediately on Clefairy, and then manages to power through my Calyrex Shadow once I lose my Clefairy. My idea was that I wanted to be able. I thought that I had the turns to click Sing a few times into Lugia, but I didn't because he got the crit really early. The other notable thing is that I went for a stupid play turn 1 where I thought that Sableye would go down to a Helping Hand, Terra Fairy, Draining Kiss, and so he would only get to click Light Screen or Taunt into my Clefairy and not both. And it did 75% after he clicked Light Screen. So I was really hoping that would knock out, and it didn't, and that put me in a really awkward spot game 2. And then combined with the relatively early critical hit, it put me behind, and I lost. And then game 3 into this, I think I played really sloppy. It was the last game of day 1 after our crazy 3-hour delay that we had at the start of the tournament. And again, I played sloppy, but it was a Lugia, and I had a really good matchup. And again, their matchup was, can they get a critical hit Aeroblast? I don't think they had any other really way to win the game. And my measure of how well I played the matchup was, how many chances do I give him to critical hit? If I gave him 1 chance to critical hit, I always give him 1 chance to critical hit, just because I don't think there's a way to really play it without giving him at least 1 if he plays it well. So he always got the 1 chance, but I gave him 3 chances at it, and I think I could have played it in a way where I only gave him 1, but I got a little too cocky in the end game. His Comfey lived an attack that I really did not expect it to on like 1 HP. It was some stupid Astro Barrage calc that he lived just barely. And I was really upset at myself because I targeted the wrong slot, just thinking that would KO. The Comfey was just a lot bulkier than I thought it was. So if you're a long-time viewer of the channel, my first video on this channel was my Comfey team from Players Cup 1. So if anyone should have known it, it should have been me. But yeah, so that was a lot scarier than I wanted it to be. But he had 3 chances to hit Aeroblast, a crit, and he actually just whiffed on one of them, and he like sort of missed the Aeroblast. And another one, he clicked Earth Power, reading a Protect, and got it wrong. So he only had really 1 chance to get the critical hit, and he didn't get it, thank God. So that was the matchup into Lugia, which was actually a lot scarier than I wanted it to be. And then day 2 came around. Day 2 meaning the actual day 2, not literally day 2 Swiss. And I was one of 5 7-0s going into the next day, and Gavin told me, you really got to prep to get the other 7-0s. The only one whose teams I knew Colin's team, but I wasn't going to sit and play games against him or talk to my friends about him because we're both good friends and we have a lot of the same friends. And so I just kind of thought about it a little bit, but that's about it. But I did prep, and I prepped against Joji before the tournament. But the thing that I learned about the matchup against Joji's team is that the number one factor is if the booster energy Flutter Mane is faster than my Calyrex Shadow after an Electroweb. If it is, then it becomes really hard because I have to get 2 Electrowebs off into it, and that is really, really difficult. Otherwise, I just force a switch. I probably had to rely on Rillaboom, and it becomes pretty challenging because Rillaboom is pretty bad into Terapagos and into Chiyu. And so game 1, I think I lead like Calyrex Shadow Raging Bolt, and he double targets the Raging Bolt with his Chiyu Flutter lead and picks up the knockout. And I protect my Calyrex Shadow, and I was like, damn, I could have just Astral Barrage, and I would have been in a great spot, but I respected Shadow Ball, and I got caught out. So what if I, so game 2, I've already falling behind, and I say I am going to just commit to the fact that his Flutter Mane is slower than my Shadow Rider. I'm going to bet the game on that. I'm going to get an Electroweb off. I'm going to put my Shadow Rider in the field, and I'm going to take the KO. He doesn't know. Also, notably, again, this is the information part. He doesn't know that I'm not max speed Shadow Rider. So he really should assume that his Flutter Mane is slower, if anything. But he doesn't know that I don't know that. And so maybe he makes a misplay. And so it gives me a couple more angles to attack it, because it not only gives me the chance to win the game if I'm faster, but also gives him the chance to mess up. And so I go for that line, and I am faster. And not only do I find out that I am faster after an Electrowebs, but also I find out that he is Modest Sash Chiyu, and so my Jolly Urshifu outspeeds him. And then going into game 3, I don't remember exactly what happens game 3, but I believe I remember it was a pretty comfortable win for me after a pretty close game 2, after finding out the Shadow Rider and the Shadow Rider interaction with Flutter Mane and the Chiyu speed stat. I had a lot more leverage in the matchup, and like I said, just preserve the Urshifu until the end game. Chiyu no longer threatens it. Terapagos is in an awkward spot, and the Raging Bolt was really good into Tornadus as well, so he felt really pressured with all of his mons, and I managed to win that set. So yeah, this is definitely a tricky matchup, but you have to play it very carefully, and I think a lot of Joji's choices made it worse into Shadow Rider. Understandable, given that you're running a Terapagos team, you expect to beat Shadow Rider, but and Shadow Rider wasn't all that common going into the tournament. That is a reasonable thing to make concessions for at the time. Now, I don't know. Although that being said, I did look at Mont's schedule, and Mont did lose to the one Terapagos he played, which was Nick. So there's some trade-offs, right? If you're using Terapagos, how much do you expect Shadow Rider? Because there's variants that are good and there are variants that are worse into it. Alternatively, if you are running Shadow Rider, how much do you respect Terapagos now that it's also falling off in usage? How much do you respect the Flutter Mane speed stats? This is why I am doing the team report and not using this team at NAIC, just to be clear, is that it is so easy to speed creep my team. And if you speed creep my team, it is so much harder for me to win. And no one knew what numbers to hit, and now they do. So it is, I think that the Shadow Rider speed tiers, I got away with so much that I shouldn't have this tournament. And I don't think I can get away with it again. Again, I think that was me team building well, me making a good meta call. Good luck finding those margins. I don't know if any team can find the margins that the Zamazenta team did at Stockholm, or the Miraidon team did, and the Terapagos teams did at Indy. The margins don't exist anymore. The metagame is too, people are figuring out how to use these mons too well. So without those margins, I don't know how good Shadow Rider is, and I am not going to be the person that figures it out, is basically where I'm at. Against Colin, again, so funny enough, I had Colin's pace because Colin and Alex and Rajan all built together. He didn't have my team because I was building with Joe, and he actually asked me before the set, like, yo, you have my pace, can I get yours? And he was like, yeah, sure, fuck it. So he knew my speed stats and I knew his, which did change the dynamic a little bit, because we'll see. I don't really want to talk about too much about my friends' teams, I guess. But he knew the speed tiers, I knew the speed tiers, and I had to play very, very aggressively both into him and into Rajan in top cut, just to have a chance. I had to make some pretty big reads, but I did make those reads, and also I think Colin didn't necessarily like play it the best. He split targets a lot when you really just need to pick a target and commit to taking the knockout, I think, against my team some of the time. And because I had, and with Rajan too, I won my set against Rajan because my Clefairy lived on like 3 HP and my Raging Bolt lived on 11 HP, and then I won a game because my Incineroar had like 5 HP. Like it was my Calyrex lived in attack on 5 HP in game 2. Like the margins against this team are so small. And it's part of why I thought that the version that Mont used might be better is if Koraidon picks up in usage. The Radiance Torn makes this matchup a whole lot better. But just like Calyrex Shadow, Koraidon was disrespected going into this tournament. I disrespected it, and I had to figure out ways to play against it. People have asked me what my lines were, and it changed game to game. But most of the time, I was really relying on Raging Bolt, Rillaboom, Calyrex Shadow, and then one of Clefairy or Incineroar to win the set from there. So, yeah. Then going into the quote-unquote day 2, I finished 9-0, like I told Jody that I would. And after that, I had, short break before facing the rest of day 2, the real day 2. And I played the 2 Ice Rider players back to back. And that actually might have messed me up a little bit because I had prepped against a team that was very similar to what Ryan had used, but I played John first, and John had a Rillaboom. And that actually changes the matchup pretty significantly because he led Rillaboom and basically 4-0'd me on lead because I was used to playing against Amoonguss, and I'd prepped for Amoonguss, and the extra damage that it exerts immediately did change the way the matchup plays pretty significantly. And so I lost game 1, and I won game 2, and then game 3, it came down to his Terra Water Calyrex Ice in Trick Room versus, and he, I think, had a Rillaboom that had used Fake Out and an Incineroar in back versus the my Raging Bolt and 2 other Pokemon. I forget exactly what they were. I don't remember the exact situation, but essentially it came down to, do I call him attacking and Thunderclap the Calyrex, or do I call him protecting, switch to Incineroar, and double the Incineroar slot to take the knockout, at which point I will have the turns to win the game against this, against the Terra Water Calyrex, right? And so he goes for the attack, and I don't Thunderclap, and I lose the game. But that was what that matchup came down to. It was very, very close. And then I played Ryan the next round, and again, I don't think I played it especially well. There was one turn especially. You can watch this. This was on stream, but you can watch this. The one mechanic you should know is that Rocky Helmet actually affects Draining Kiss. Draining Kiss is a contact move, and so there was a turn on game 3. I think I got very lucky to win game 2. I could critical hit him. That put me in a commanding position. And then game 3. This Raging Bolt was on the field. I could Draining Kiss it and get all the way back up to full. He had already protected that turn, but I was really scared of the Amoonguss switching in and me taking Rocky Helmet recoil and losing my Calyrex because it was at really low HP. And so I opted to Astral Barrage instead, calling the Amoonguss switch in, and the Amoonguss was not in back. It was Pellet for Urshifu in back. So I lost that game because of that, but I thought it was a reasonable call to make. It's hard to tell that on stream. It looked like a stupid play on stream, I'm sure. But yeah, I did have a good reason for that play. In hindsight, Akil, Flaming Victini, I was talking to him afterwards, and he pointed out, I don't remember the exact situation, but he pointed out a better play that I could have done with my partner that would have given me more margins. Like at the end of the day, what I made was a sort of mid-ground play. I didn't really commit to a line when I really could have committed to a play, and I think won the game there. So I think that I overall, like, between getting very lucky to win game 2 and playing game 3 poorly, I think that I played this set very poorly. And Ryan played it very well, but that kind of reiterates what I was saying, that, hey, this matchup, Nasty Plot makes it way, way better, right? Nasty Plot made Mon's matchup into this team so good. My matchup was even, I think. And Ryan played better than me and won the matchup as a result. But I think it's okay to have even matchups, right? Again, I did lose to Calyrex Ice, so you could argue it is a negative matchup. But having an even matchup is okay, especially if it means that your bad matchups get better. And with this team, I really increased the floor of the team and decreased the ceiling of the team. I made its good matchups worse and its bad matchups better. And that certainly hurt me in this set, and it probably hurt me against Mont as well. But yeah, so I was 0-2 going in day 2, and I was really scared because 9-0 usually has really good resistance, but if you lose the first 2, then all of a sudden it becomes a little more questionable. And thankfully, both Ryan and John both ended up having really good day 2s and both ended up cutting. So I ended up getting in on resistance anyways. I managed to beat Carter, who was on Miraidon. I was like, oh my god, I am so thankful to see a relatively standard Miraidon team that I know how to play against. And I kind of clapped Carter because I had prepped against the matchup and played against the matchup and played against James in the matchup. And that was a big confidence boost because I was getting very close to tilting myself out of top cut. Then I played Zach, and again, another matchup that I'd seen before, or similar to a matchup that I'd seen before. And I got some info from people who had played him earlier about his speed tiers as well. Like I think he was Adamant Talonflame, for example. I did not know he was Adamant Chenpao as well. And I beat him game 1 pretty comfortably, and then game 2 I played pretty well, and he got a bunch of turns right and put himself in the game, and then I got a turn right and put myself in a winning position, and then I tossed, and then he tossed back, which is nice because he did not know his calcs into my Pokemon, and I lived on some pretty low HP number, and all he had to do was Wood Hammer with Rillaboom, but because he Grassy Glided, it did not pick up, and I got to Draining Kiss his Chenpao and go back up to full. It really helped that his Chenpao was Adamant and not Jolly as well. I found that out midway through game 2. And that also made that matchup a lot easier. So, yeah, so at that point, I was pretty sure I was locked into Cut, but I wasn't 100% sure. And I did try against Kian. I also played really, really poorly in game 1, where he played really well in game 1. I didn't fully appreciate how the team worked. Zacian taught me a calc. It did way more damage than I thought it did. And then I got back in the game because I hit a Sing, and I got a double protect, and I got a 3-turn sleep, and I needed all those things. And then I needed to parting shot the Incineroar parting shot with my Incineroar into the Urshifu to put it at -2 so that Aqua Jet, I would live in Aqua Jet, and I could stall out. I stalled this Tailwind with double protect. I needed to lower the Aqua Jet damage with parting shot, and then get a 3-turn sleep, get the parting shot off, get the double protect, and then I could Astro Barrage after Tailwind ended and expired. And I was like, it was good. I knew that was what I had to do. But I had a brain fart because it was so many different things that had to go right for me to have a chance to win that game. And then all of them did, except I clicked Will-O-Wisp instead of Parting Shot, and it was still asleep because why would it? Yeah, like, of course, right? And so I lost game 1. And then I won game 2, and game 3 he beat me pretty comfortably. Kian also beat Montana, right? And so the Montana's team, and so it was a hard matchup for sure. It was a really hard matchup. Umbreon is very, very annoying. Clefairy and Calyrex do not really appreciate steel types, and so Zacian was actually a very difficult matchup. Definitely playable, definitely winnable. If I had played the set a little better, I think I could have won it, but Kian played excellently throughout the tournament. Honestly, it was a little unfortunate not to win the tournament, all things considered, given how the top 4 set went. But yeah, I was pretty confident because Kian had gone 5-0 in day 2. I would have good resistance. Ryan would win his set and go 5-0 in day 2. John would win his set, make it into top cut as well in the 8th seed. So I had really fantastic resistance and made it into cut playing Rajan of all people, my very good friend and the person who suggested I use the Choice Band Rillaboom in the first place. And this set was also so sloppy. It was so sloppy from both of us. We were having a lot of fun playing it, but I remember game 1 I tossed because I didn't click Draining Kiss. I clicked Astro Barrage to KO the Koraidon, and then it's like covering for a Chiyu switch that never really was going to happen. And then as a result, the Chiyu or the Flutter, I forget exactly what the end game was, but he managed to take a KO because I did not have enough HP left with his one last Pokemon left. And so I misplayed that to kind of toss game 1. And then game 2 was super close, and I managed to win that with like 5 HP on my Calyrex at +1 speed def. It probably was a roll realistically, but again, it was like I had 3 Pokemon that lived on under 10 hit points to win that game. And then game 3, once again, I had a bunch of Pokemon that lived on such low hit points. My Clefairy lived, I think my Clefairy and his, no, hold up. I dropped Clefairy that game. So my Incineroar lived an attack on very low HP, and then I decided that I wanted my Fake Out live, so I sacked my full health Rillaboom at some point to get my Incineroar back on the field. And the end game was really funny because he burnt my Raging Bolt. It was Raging Bolt with Calyrex Shadow and his last turn of Tailwind, and he just burnt my Raging Bolt. So I had, and he had his Flutter Mane, which I can pull the team up, I guess. I haven't actually showed their team off yet. But the Flutter Mane was Choice Specs, so it had to lock into a move. And the Chiyu was Choice Scarf, and it also had to lock into a move. And the Chiyu, it already locked into Heat Wave. The Flutter Mane had not, it pretty much had to Shadow Ball, right? But it was a question of whether it had to Shadow Ball my Calyrex Shadow, or if it had to Shadow Ball which could protect, or it could Shadow Ball my Raging Bolt. And I thought it was a 50-50, because I had Protect Life, last turn of Tailwind. If I Shadow, and I had Electro Web. So if I protect Electro Web, and I hit both Electro Webs, then then both Pokemon are slower than me because the sun is about to expire and Tailwind's about to expire, and I can get Astro Ball off and win the game. Or if he double targets, it calls the Protect, double targets my Raging Bolt, I lose, right? Then all of a sudden, I don't get the Electro Webs off, and even though I knew that his Flutter Mane was faster than my Calyrex Shadow without the Electro Webs boost, and then on top of that, I forget it was Tailwind or Sun, something like that, right? One of the things that boosts Flutter Mane speed stat, and then also Chiyu also had a Choice Scarf, so he was gonna outspeed me anyways. So I needed to make that call, and the previous turn he had burnt my Raging Bolt, and he said something like, "Oh, that locks it up, doesn't it?" Because it was very clear that innocent remark told me that he thought that Heat Wave from his Chiyu would take the knockout on my Raging Bolt. And as a result, I knew what move he was going to go for. And I clicked Protect, and I clicked Electro Web, and I hit both my Electro Webs, and my Raging Bolt lived on 10 HP. The ensuing Heat Wave, it lived the ensuing Heat Wave on 10 HP, and got the Electro Webs off, and the Shadow Ball went into my Protect and Calyrex Shadow, and I won the game because of that. So Rajan was pretty down on himself after that because he kind of tossed. He really literally just told me which side of the 50-50 he was going for, and I won because of that. But I also tossed game 1, so it was a little bit of a sloppy set. It was like, but it is what it is, and I managed to win. I managed to get to top 4 where I played Montana. That game was streamed. There was one turn in particular that I don't want to. I don't have it on here, but I don't want to pull it up, but you can watch it again. Where to game 1, I thought he had Tornin back, and I had a chance to click Astro Barrage and take 2 KOs, or he could protect Calyrex and take 1 KO. But then if he brings in Tornadus and clicks Tailwind and click Astro Barrage, he reverse sweeps me, right? And I did not want that to happen. So I did a play that was just I clicked Calm Mind, I think, calling that play, calling the Protect, saying that next turn if he protects and I call that right, then I can Astro Barrage and I can win the game. And he didn't do that, and also he did not have Tornadus in back, and I lost the game because of that. And then game 2, he did have Tornadus in back, and he won pretty comfortably. I think that he played. I think he was supposed to play game 1 like he played game 2. I think that was he played that right. I think I played it pretty wrong. I think that I had to find out whether my Calyrex was faster or not game 1, and not assume that I was slower. That is a very that was the wrong way of approaching it. So I could have just led Calyrex and click Astral and done stuff like that, and just played really aggressively with my Rillaboom and my Raging Bolt, and that might have gotten me there. But I didn't do that game 2 either, and I got run over, and I missed a Sing. And so, the Sing maybe gave me a chance to win the game. But Mont played that so well, and I think that it's a bad matchup for me. Again, I didn't really respect this matchup going into it, and the only saving grace I had was that my Calyrex was faster, and I didn't take advantage of that when I had the chance to in game 2. So that was really on my fault. I think I could have played it a lot better. And maybe in that case, I win the regional, or I get seconds to Ryan more realistically, because that matchup is also very difficult. But yeah, that is my team. You can see the pace on screen, and also actually the rental code on screen. Put the rental code on screen. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so you can see the rental code on screen. The pace will be in the description down below. So I hope you try this out. I think it's a really, really strong take on Calyrex. I put a lot of work, as you can see by this very long team report, I put a lot of work into the team. I put a lot of prep into this tournament. I put a lot of, the team has a lot of nuance to it that is maybe more so than people understand when they see how you just use Clef CSR and with Firewater Grass. Like, I get it. It's a boring looking team. But there's a lot of thought that goes into even boring looking teams, and I wanted to kind of dive into detail for anyone who wanted to use Calyrex Shadow maybe at the Bologna special event, or at one of the nationals that are coming up in Asia, or at the North American Championships. I hope that this helps everyone. I hope that you can take inspiration from it. Again, just because Montana and Davidness won with Tornadus doesn't mean that it is the definitive way to run the team. We all had our own little flavor on it, and I hope this kind of articulates why I made the choices that I did, and which choices I kind of talked about some of the choices that I would recommend keeping, and some of the choices that I would maybe drop moving forward, and some of the challenges moving forward for this team as well. So yeah, definitely recommend that you try this team out. I think it's really, really strong, and I'm really happy with how I did. So yeah, shout outs to everyone who helped. I mean, shout outs to Tub Nation as per usual. You can watch me and Alex stream on Tub Nation TV, twitch.tv. And yeah, shout outs to everyone who helped out: Rajan, Nick, Connor, Joe, Kieran, Sohaib. I mean, the list, Chase, the list goes on and on. Everyone, Michael, Dan, everyone helped. So many people helped. it really takes a village to do well. And I really, really appreciate everyone who helped me get as far as I did, who came up to me and talked to me during these tournaments. It's so fun to meet everyone. We had the long 3-hour break where I got to basically use it as a social call and talk to everyone, and I had a blast at Los Angeles as a result. This was really cool. It was really cool to do this well at the regional. I'm really proud of my team. I'm really proud of my friends. For 4 of top 8 were Tub Nation, and it was so cool. And yeah, I'm hoping to figure out if I can do something similar at North American Internets, and hopefully you see me back in day 2 over there. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, I will see you all later.